Hi there, this is Beth Turner here with the Huddle, and today I'm with Elton Dimech, the Managing Director of Payhound. Elton, how are you?
I'm very well. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. We're over here in used to be sunny England, but it's September now, so that's all come and gone. But today I wanted to talk to you specifically about crypto and crypto payment processes. Crypto has become increasingly popular in the gaming market over the past couple of years. What do you feel are the key factors that have brought more online casinos into accepting crypto?
Yeah, so gambling companies and online casinos have always been at the forefront to enable alternative payment methods. And obviously, crypto was a viable solution for these sort of companies to allow their players to have an alternative way to deposit and withdraw. And what I've seen as well from the past experiences that I had when dealing with online casinos, for example, is that they have also identified that there are specific markets where there are greater probability that players hold crypto, maybe due to their local political instability in the region or periods of high inflation. And that has also led for players in those specific regions to organically have or hold crypto. And so online casinos would target these specific markets. There are also other items I think that we can mention. For example, there are certain markets that accessing through traditional payment methods like fiat methods is quite challenging. So enabling a crypto solution for their players in those markets would be the ideal option for those online casinos.
Absolutely. I can't remember the name of the country off the top of my head, but I know not too long ago there was a country that introduced Bitcoin as like a national currency, if I'm not mistaken.
That was El Salvador, I think.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. And as you said, that's a way for some people in certain countries where, like you said, the finances are so unstable, going into crypto is a really good option for them. But in terms of processing those payments, what are the most important traits and important factors that a payment processor must have?
Yeah, so normally, let me tell you what merchants usually look at. Primarily, it's fees, but
Mhm.
obviously, one needs to look at the license and the regulatory framework that the payment processor possesses, because that should give sufficient comfort when dealing with the service provider. Why? Because the service provider, in that case, should have certain customer protection and certain substance requirements and other requirements that should give, also from a security perspective, should give the merchant the necessary comfort that his money that will be kept with the crypto payment processor are safe, because there are some merchants that will be holding either crypto or fiat with the payment processor for a certain period of time. I would also look for the people behind the project and the knowledge that they can convey when the merchant is looking for the appropriate crypto payment processor that would need to be integrated with the system, and also the variation of coin offerings that the processor have, because obviously the more crypto payment options available in terms of coin offering will enable the merchant to give as much flexibility to its players.
Absolutely. And even though there are so many cryptocurrencies to choose from, Bitcoin has, for the most part, been the most popular, if not one of the most popular coins to bet with. But as everyone knows with Bitcoin, it also has a really long block time. It takes quite a while for those transfers to be processed. So how do crypto payment processors deal with coins like Bitcoin that have that long transaction period?
So let me tell you what we do in case of Payhound. What we do here, we're integrated with a insurance company that what her role is checking the mempool, which is checking the area where transactions can be checked before they are written on the blockchain, and they ensure that there is no concept of double spending. Double spending meaning that the player, in that case, tries to use the same crypto to be able to pay two parties, for example. in case the confidence score given by this insurance company is high, we will credit right away the amount to the merchant, and the merchant can inform the player that the money is theirs. And this happens within very few seconds. So yes, I agree with you that with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, unless you have solutions like these, you as a player will need to wait a few minutes, if not more, to be able to have your funds credited on the online casino. But with solutions like these, you are able to eliminate those extensive timing periods.
For sure. And as I said, Bitcoin is still one of the most popular coins to bet with. So you almost have to have those processes in place in order to account for the wants and needs of those customers.
Yeah, in fact, I always thought that the majority of the flows when it comes to the B2C side of the business would be done primarily with stable coins. And I would have thought before I joined Payhound at the time, around 5 years ago, I always thought that Bitcoin was mainly used for token appreciation. So you keep it for speculation to try and make some money out of it. But in all fairness, Bitcoin, as you mentioned, is still the cryptocurrency that is mostly used also for transferring payments from one place to the other.
Mm-hmm. So I want to change gears slightly and kind of look more into regulation now. So regulation around crypto is changing quite rapidly in Europe. In your own words, would you be able to give me a brief summary of MiCA and the travel rule and the goals of those regulations?
So for those that don't know what MiCA stands for, MiCA is the Markets in Crypto Asset Regulation, which is a new regulation that all crypto asset service providers will have to be subjected to by the 30th of December of this year. So the idea and the main aim of this regulation is to ensure that there is stability in the market, and also ensure that there is fair competition within the market as well. What I can say as well is that there are certain jurisdictions within Europe that already have a regulatory framework, like Malta, where Payhound is registered, and there are some others that either have lighter regulation or less stringent registration processes, and some others that have nothing at all at the moment. The idea of the European Union is to have a level playing field between all the EU member states, so all the crypto asset service providers will need to abide by the same regulation. So there will be no longer any regulatory arbitrage between one jurisdiction and the other. What will happen as well is that because some of jurisdictions, as I mentioned, have their own regulatory framework, this will be repealed. So any national jurisdiction that have its own national regulation will have this regulation repealed and replaced by the markets in crypto assets. With respect to the travel rule, which coincidentally will be also implemented within the same day as MiCA, will allow for exchange of information between the remitter and beneficiary details, between the remitting VASP and the receiving CASP, meaning that the idea there is to mitigate as much as possible the anonymity of transactions and allow for whoever will be receiving the information to make further assessments whether this payment will need to be approved or rejected.
Yeah, and in the current state of these regulations, as these regulations currently stand, what do you think will be the biggest challenges for crypto payment processors like yours?
Okay, when it comes to MiCA, I think for some crypto asset service providers, because of what I mentioned, that there is a bit of regulatory arbitrage at the moment, some crypto asset service providers that are operating from jurisdictions where there is very little to no regulation, for them it will be a radical jump and change to step up in order to be compliant with this regulation. I predict that some of them might even have to cease operating because they are not able to comply with such stringent requirements. And these requirements stem from substance requirements and the persons involved that can run the company, for example, capital, liquidity requirements, and also customer funds protection. Just few items that they will be really enforced through this new regulation. There are also issues relating to stablecoin issuers and the compliance of certain stablecoins that will be offered within the EU. Because the markets and crypto assets regulation does not only regulate crypto asset service provider alone, but it tries to regulate the entire market and all the stakeholders within the market, also making reference to those that issue stable coins or that issue tokens in general. So when it comes to stable coins, and as you might know, USDT, Tether is the most important within the market, they are up until now not compliant with MiCA, meaning that come 30th of December, crypto asset service providers like us, if things stand as they are right now, they will not be able to offer USDT within the EU market, which is
As I'd say, that is a very big one. I
yes,
believe I think I went on to CoinGecko the other day, and even though Bitcoin is still, the highest value token in terms of like 24-hour trade volume, it is USDT that is the most traded. So that would have a significant knock-on effect for the coin, but also for a lot of people trading with it.
Agreed. So what we need to do is obviously try and educate the people to try to shift certain volumes from USDT into other stable coins if they want to have the same types of flows that allow for their day-to-day business. In terms of travel rule, the main challenges is that we, as crypto asset service providers, need to implement new compliance frameworks and processes because now, with more information at hand, we are able to make further assessment that we were not able to do before unless we go to the customer and ask for the information ourselves. Now we'll have all the information in hand without even asking for it. So that will obviously change a lot of the processes in hand. However, the biggest challenge that I see on the travel rule is because the way that it was built, there is no centralized protocol of travel rule, meaning that if, for example, Payhound signs with solution A, but the receiving cusp is with solution B that is using a different protocol, there will not be a successful communication between the two parties. So there is still the risk that we will not be able to send or receive, even though we have the information to the other party.
It seems like it could definitely put some challenges forward, and definitely interesting that USDT might be kind of in the firing line of this. One thing I would also like to know about is obviously you guys are a payment processing solution for crypto, but for the gaming operators themselves, what are going to be the challenges they face in regulation, and how do you think they're going to be able to navigate it?
Look, in terms of MiCA, it won't affect them that much, apart from what we mentioned before, in relation to stable coins, if USDT is the primary coin that they offer to their players, for example. However, if you are registered with a crypto asset service provider that has robust regulation already, there will be not many differences when companies like us are transposed into the new regulation. And there are 3 jurisdictions that are very close to what MiCA is expecting from crypto asset service providers, and those are Malta, where Payhound is registered. There is France and Liechtenstein as well. So those 3 jurisdictions have been acknowledged by the European Union to have a very close regulatory framework to that will be implemented very soon in December. So for those that have accounts with these kind of crypto asset service providers in these 3 jurisdictions, I don't see that they will see a lot of difference, to be fair. For others, yes, there might be certain other requirements relating to compliance requirements, reporting capabilities that they need to be aware of. In terms of travel rule, there will be some changes, but not drastic. In terms of, for example, as a crypto payment processor, with the travel rule implemented, we will need to send, for example, player information when the merchant is making a payout, so the online casino is making a payout back to the player, meaning that at the moment we are not obliged to know who the player is unless we perform transaction monitoring, for example, because the particular transaction is flagged and we collect that information. With travel rule, we will need to collect this information. So the merchant will need to provide that either via the API if they're using the processing solution, or manually through the user interface if they're making a payment through our user interface. However, it's not really that different from making a payment through a banking infrastructure. So the same information like name and surname, and certain details that you normally include when you're remitting a payment will need to be required also when travel rule comes into place.
That's interesting, because one thing I think, as we all know about people that use crypto, is that there is kind of an appreciation of anonymity. That's why a lot of people went to crypto in the first place. So what I kind of love to know from your perspective, what do you feel are maybe the strengths and the weaknesses of these regulations?
The strengths of this regulation is that for me, when crypto has been stamped by a union like the European Union, it obviously shows that now it is big, and as big to be seen by a regulator that even wants to regulate it, because it understands the power that it has, and therefore, as what happens usually with power, the governmental or the institutions up there try to regulate it so that they want to avoid situations where there are situations like FTX, for example, in US, and the idea is to avoid situations like that. Having more credibility in the market. So usually with regulation, there is more stability, and you get the attention of bigger players, not only in the gaming space, but also other businesses that are usually more traditional, because with online casinos, at least, you have those discussions because they always look for alternative payment methods. But it will always also help in instances where you're talking to bigger banks, to businesses like investment funds, investment services, where unfortunately crypto is not really popular there. So this regulation will regulate and allow us to have those sort of discussions if we want to enter into that sphere as well. In terms of weaknesses, I fear that unless the local regulators within the EU don't enforce it in a proper way in all of those jurisdictions, we will have still some regulatory arbitrage, because imagine that you have certain jurisdictions that will abide to the letter to these regulations, and some others that don't. And therefore, the issue of regulatory arbitrage that we're facing at the moment will still, to a certain extent, be faced even after this regulation is implemented. There are also some weaknesses in relation to the regulation itself that sometimes is left for interpretation. So some operators, by operators I mean the service providers, in this case as crypto asset service providers, might interpret it one way, whilst another crypto asset service provider might interpret it in another way. For example, we've seen instances like stablecoin issues, because that requirement for stablecoin issuers was set on 30th of June of this year. And we have seen exchanges like, for example, Binance taking an approach that they are blocking buys for EU users. OKX completely eliminating USDT from an option. So you see, not all of them have taken the same approach, because there are some instances and clauses within that regulation that have been left for interpretation for the crypto asset service provider.
USDT is just having a terrible time recently, isn't it? It's not been
Yes.
great. One thing you mentioned in there that I think is quite interesting is that it's when crypto is regulated like this, it brings attention towards it and it gets kind of bigger companies and bigger people talking about it. It kind of legitimizes it to an extent. And that's always been something that, people within crypto have always wanted to do whenever a big celebrity or a big company endorses it, or, oh, we're Starbucks and now you can buy your coffee with Bitcoin, that kind of thing. It always kind of tries to add an air of legitimacy to it. Do you think with the regulation of crypto coming into place, more online casinos will start embracing cryptocurrency as a payment option?
I think so. I firmly believe that is what will happen. The thing is that with this new regulation, we as a crypto asset service provider will be very equivalent in terms of AML obligations, for example, similar to banks, to financial institutions, to investment services, and other financial services businesses, meaning that we are either equal in terms of obligations. Why shouldn't we, in terms of the banking infrastructure, be looked at in a different way that we are being looked at the moment, for example? So this, I hope that by time the regulation will help also the businesses on the other side that need us as a service provider to be able to engage freely, because their own AML and compliance teams like online casinos will have a different approach towards crypto, because now it is widely regulated within the EU. So certain markets that maybe never looked at crypto before because they still have other payment options available in those markets, crypto can now be looked at because it's not any different from the other.
Fantastic. Now, I've just got one more to wrap up today, but I really do appreciate your time today, Elton. Overall, how do you feel that the relationship between crypto and gaming is going to evolve over the next few years?
I think the relationship will continue to grow. It has always been, when crypto has emerged, gaming in general has been one of the main users of crypto because it's easy. It gives an exciting way of a player depositing without having to wait for the bank to open on a Saturday, on a Sunday. You can receive the money quickly. You can get the payout right away if you get paid in crypto. So this will continue morphing, but in a more stable way. I really do hope that this will become mainstream, not in gaming only, but in general. With respect to gaming, however, I think that the larger setups, once Mika, for example, has been implemented, they will start looking at this more attentively, and not only for processing, but also to be able to move larger amounts of funds from different continents. Because, as you know, with online casinos, if they're based in Europe but targeting certain markets outside of Europe, they are still faced with challenges from banks that do not want to service them with SWIFT, meaning that they might have some difficulties in moving larger settlements out of those markets where they are targeting in terms of their products and services. So I think the relationship will continue growing because the legitimacy, as you mentioned, will help all of this and will continue to develop in the coming years.
Fantastic. Well, I said we'll see what happens, won't we? But I really appreciate your time today, Elton. Thank you for those answers. And to everyone watching, thank you for being here.